Project Omega is solving the nuclear waste problem. We believe that we can have an infinite energy economy. We built the first prototype materials in the US that took the radiation from these isotopes and spent nuclear fuel and converted that into electricity. It was always trash. It still is trash in France, Russia, and China. I think that we need to do this for national security. We need to be better than China at this. We need to be a lot better than them at this. I feel like this all started with this incredible slide deck that you made.
Here's actually where that deck started. I have a friend who's a lot, again, I don't do any of the work. I just spark some stuff. So I have a friend who's a lot smarter than me, Princeton, NASA, DOE, and runs a large renewables company now. And we were hanging out and I was doing the VC thing and talking about nuclear. And he kind of rolled his eyes at me as a guy that owns a lot of non-nuclear energy, utility grade assets. And he goes, yeah, that's fine. But if they ever have to internalize the cost of dealing with the waste, all the economics go away. And I was like, I'd never really heard that take from anybody, but we were already late to the reactor game. Those companies had gotten big. And so anyway, I just kind of lobbed it over at Angèle and said, my really smart friend told me nuclear is not going to work unless there are better options for dealing with the waste. We should look into that. I handed that to Angèle. And then what did you do, Angèle?
Well, yeah, I did spend a good amount of time diving into this world and getting up to speed on what is technical fuel exactly. I think to Will's initial thesis, I still haven't run the whole analysis on what the math says about this. Does it break the economics for nuclear? I'm still TBD on this, but the one interesting thing for me was more the first principle analysis of we are about to hopefully bring online a lot of new reactors in the next couple of decades, but we still haven't figured out how to build a serious infrastructure for how to deal with spent nuclear fuel in the US.
You did the deck, shot it out in the world, got a ton of reviews. And Staff, did you see the deck? Did it get forwarded to you? Were you on our distro list?
Yeah, one of your portfolio founders. So you had a friend who's a founder that brought this up to you. I had a friend who's a founder that brought this up to me, who is who you guys led around for, and spoke super highly of all of you, super highly, and introduced me to Angèle. And we had done an analysis for our business plan on all of that, and we read the deck and thought you did an awesome job on the slide deck.
Thank you.
And there were a few things that we had contributed to an analysis that we kind of brought up, and we said, hey. Here are some ideas that we have to make this economic. I would say one of the core ideas, and this is going to be in some of the press that we're getting in the next couple of weeks, one of the core ideas is that there's still 90% of the energy left in the nuclear waste. We don't use the vast majority of the energy in nuclear fuel is totally unused. And you just build up fission products and other things like that that make it waste. But what if you just take some of those things out and recycle it and utilize that 90% of energy that's still left in the fuel? So at Project Omega, that's what we do. And one of the first things that we needed to do to actually prove that you could take nuclear waste and turn the radiation that comes out of that nuclear waste, out of the specific isotopes in that nuclear waste, into electricity, right? Because electricity is the type of energy that we find most useful. We can use electricity to power data centers. We can use it to power all sorts of stuff, the computers that we're talking on right now. So how do you take nuclear waste and turn it into the most useful form of energy that we have? We take it from radiation that is not always super useful to electricity that we know how to use way better than radiation. And that's what we demonstrated. We built the first prototype materials in decades in the US that took the radiation from these isotopes and spent nuclear fuel and converted that into electricity that we could use to power things like microprocessors, used to power things like when we get to larger scales, AI data centers, and things like that.
I'm fascinated with this idea of what matters is what people say about you when you're not in the room. What's the tagline, or what do you want people saying about you when you're not in the room, passing along the message in a game of telephone?
That we're the best energy company out there in the nuclear fuel cycle, doesn't work without recycling.
Just to add something, but I think it was also part of the why Project Omega was so much of a no-brainer when I ended up meeting with Steph is how you reframe nuclear waste not just as something like a liability to dispose of, but something to unlock and brought those use cases that we're going after right now, being so strategic. I just fell in love with this reframing of this whole question where for decades you've had people trying to basically bury nuclear waste. And we've heard this whole debate around Yucca Mountain. And you have countries now like Finland who are moving forward with doing this. And I just love the reframing that you brought to this question.
What do you guys believe that nobody else does?
We believe that we can access all of that energy. We believe that we can have an infinite energy economy because we have all the materials there. We have the energy. It's literally sitting. It's not underground. Everybody thinks we buried it. It literally is sitting next to the power plants all around the country.
So unpack that more. Tell me more. Why do you believe that?
Well, there are a lot of different forms of energy that we can harvest. I believe that specifically because that is going to be the most economic pathway to deploying nuclear energy, just in general. And I think nuclear energy is the most economic form of energy that we have to go into the future. It's also the cleanest. Really, it all comes down to how easy is it to access that energy, right? Solar is a great energy source, but it's not very easy to access. Solar panels are energy intensive and costly to make. They're great for certain applications, but nuclear has the scale and it has the output that we need to power the things that we want to power. I mean, manufacturing is another one. I say, AI and data centers because it's top of mind for so many people right now. But we need to manufacture in the United States. In order to manufacture things, you need a lot of electricity.
What's your reasonably unreasonable take where everyone's smart is you guys are missing this, and they hear you out there shit, that's a good answer?
Our unreasonable take is that the way that we're going to make the economics work for reprocessing is by utilizing what's called the fission products. Those are usually the bad part of it that you just throw out. We're making the economics work by utilizing fission products like Strontium-90, Americium-241, Curium-244. Those fission products have tons of energy in them, and you need to be able to harvest them effectively, right, in order to access that energy. And that's what we demonstrated, using some of these fission products to generate new energy rather than, essentially just taking the nuclear waste as a whole and trying to recycle that purely into fresh fuel for reactors, right? We still are making fresh fuel for reactors, but the way we're making the economics work are with these fission products that were historically, they were historically trash, but one man's trash is another man's treasure.
How'd you figure that out? That sounds crazy.
Yeah, that's the other big question I have for staff. Walk us through, what preceded Project Omega. Can you walk us through, what led you to this? And also, to my earlier point about people talking about we need to bury nuclear waste, what was the aha moment for you when you realized, well, no, actually, this thing is super strategic?
Well, the big aha moment was when we found some customers who were looking for, you could think about it like a battery that never dies. So think about it if you have an iPhone and the lifetime, the lifetime of the iPhone working, you don't even need to recharge it. It literally will last as long as Apple wants the processor to last. So until they want you to buy a new iPhone. So think about applications like that, and think about the applications that completely decoupling small electronics from the need for a lithium-ion battery. Think about all those broad applications. It was customer interviews. We spoke with folks who could have a demand for that. Think about, customers in the military where energy, especially operational energy and contested logistics, are major problems. Now, there's big energy problems. We have to be able to fly a C-130. And then there are little energy problems. We need to be able to power a communications device. We target the little energy problems. And those, in a lot of cases, are way more strategic than even some of the big energy problems. So we found, the first market where the economics would work out for these batteries that never die.
Yep.
And
but
they're
how
really
do you even
battery
know you
replacements.
can do this? There's all these. Everyone has just treated this as waste forever. How? I guess that's what I'm missing in the plot. Is where were you sitting around looking at trash, going, that to me is probably where the most unreasonable thing has to lie, right?
100%. I think honestly, it was serendipity. Prior to doing this, I'm a serial entrepreneur by background. One of the earlier companies that I ran was in the metal refining space. that company, the company that did metal refining, we did a lot of separations that are very similar to spent nuclear fuel separations. And over the course of 2025, did a lot of just playing around in the laboratory. I'm a tinkerer. I like to fix my own truck. I like to, build things with my hands. And so we made the first devices and partnered with Pacific Northwest National Lab to incorporate the nuclear waste into it.
I feel like the other elephant in the room right now is when you start talking about nuclear waste reprocessing in the US, the first thing that people flag to you is, well, there's actually a moratorium right now on like reprocessing for this nuclear waste. So I think that's a good segue into also the team that you brought together and like the people that are now working with you. But walk us through how you are planning to navigate that, and also just talk to us about the amazing people you now have working with you on Project Omega.
Well, the most important thing when you're starting a business is your team. Your technology, everything else is, it almost, it's way less relevant than your team. So my first KPI, my first job after starting Project Omega in the middle of last year was to build the best team in nuclear. So we hired extremely strong folks to work with us. We have former special operators, so for folks who used to be, in special operations themselves, veterans of different uniformed services. We have folks who have experience building large facilities on federal land. We have a former NRC chairman, so the person who most recently, was the chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We have folks, leaders from the Department of Defense, now Department of War. But when they were there, it was the Department of Defense. So we have an incredible team at Project Omega that that's well suited, and we have the expertise to do this, to execute on this, and to close the nuclear fuel cycle in the U.S. Vastly reduce the volume of nuclear waste that's out there. Right, it doesn't completely get rid of all the nuclear waste, but it's much easier to manage a few kilograms than it is to manage 90,000 metric tons.
Why did everyone jump to reactors?
I think because it's an easier story to tell, honestly. The way we make the economics work are with these fission products, which is, again, it was always trash. It still is trash in France, Russia, and China. Actually, China's unfortunately starting to catch up with us on utilizing these fission products. That's one of the reasons, that I think that we need to do this for national security. We need to be better than China at this. We need to be a lot better than them at this. Now, the reason why people, I think, focused on reactors initially was because it's a much easier story to sell. We sell kilowatt hours, and so you're much closer to the customer. It's kind of like an easier step to go from we're developing a reactor to just deploying nuclear energy. When you're on the fuel cycle, you have to be able to articulate your value proposition a bit better. And now there are a lot of other great companies that are on the fuel cycle that we're going to need in the U.S. People that are doing enrichment, people that are improving mining, people that are doing conversion and deconversion of uranium and things like that. So for all of those companies, we all face a little bit of a challenge. We're going to the gold rush, but we're selling picks and shovels. We're not going to get gold ourselves.
I'm just curious, in your mind, when you think about everything you do, like how fully do you think you've mapped this universe of potential applications?
I think we've only started scratching the surface, to be honest, because it changes the way fundamentally that you think about energy when all of a sudden anything that's under 60 kilowatts is powered by a safe, first off, the emitters that we're using are alpha and beta emitters, not gamma emitters. So, we're deploying these as kind of these are like the safe option in nuclear. Everybody already has some of these elements in their house already. For example, in their smoke detectors, there's Americium-241 in everybody's smoke detectors. So you all already have a nuclear power source sitting in your house with you.
That's wild. Can we just pause on that for a sec? That for all the talk, we actually have we have nuclear waste powering things in our house.
Yeah, you have you were sitting in a room undoubtedly with a little piece of nuclear waste in a smoke detector.
That's wild.
They use the americium emits these alpha particles, and the alpha particles hit a detector. And when the smoke particles hit go into that little detector chamber, the alpha particles from americium hit the smoke particles instead of the detector. And so the way that you figure out that you actually are your house is burning down is with that little piece of nuclear waste that's sending a signal, and as soon as that signal is blocked off, your smoke alarm goes off.
That's wild.
I feel like dinner conversations with staff must be super interesting. It must be constantly coming up with like facts like this.
Yeah, I bring my nuclear batteries to dinner with me.
What were when you were out fundraising, what were the best takes you got from VCs? Not the people who obviously didn't get it. That's like easy dunks. Did you learn something as you went through? You're like, oh shit, that's a good question. I should get the answer. Or was everyone just kind of missing the plot who didn't invest?
Actually, the people that really got it were the ones that realized that this fundamentally changes how you think about energy, especially for small electronics and for for like things that a diesel genset would power. So for like backup power. And even for larger, down the line, this is like 10 plus years, you could think about this powering even larger things. The people who really got it were the ones who realized that this is not just, another energy application or another reactor or a slight improvement to efficiency. This literally can change the way that we think about and utilize energy, especially on smaller scales. Just hard stop. So it's transformative to the entire energy industry as we grow this. I think on top of that, we solved this whole nuclear waste problem. I think there are pits in the ground across the United States that we've thrown tens of billions of dollars into that have been unsuccessful at storing nuclear waste. And one of the problems with that is they have all this stuff in them. You need to separate out some of the nasty stuff in order to make the nuclear waste a little more palatable for long-term storage. On top of that, most of the uranium that we have in the US is in the nuclear waste. It's still 96% reusable uranium. People don't get that. Nuclear waste is mostly just uranium, which is, that's not a harmful, it's really not that harmful. It's the same uranium. It's very similar to the uranium that comes out of the ground. So it also is a domestic source of a critical mineral that we need for our energy independence in the United States.
Well, I'm gonna borrow like one of your favorite questions. Like fast forward 15, 20 years from now, like say you're maximally correct. Like how does the world work then?
A big piece of it is that we enable deployment of additional nuclear capacity because we take care of all the waste. And as Will mentioned, that really is one of the biggest problems in the nuclear industry. What do you do with the waste? It's a combination of we're changing the way that people will use energy. So your laptops and iPhones don't die anymore. But on top of that, we're enabling much lower cost energy for broader deployment of nuclear, just whether you're deploying AP1000s like the big gigawatt reactors, or if you're deploying small modular reactors or microreactors, no matter what. And I would say one of the most important things as well is that we no longer have to rely on Russian and foreign sources of uranium here in the United States. So that gives us the energy independence. We learned from, some experiences out in Europe that relying on certain countries for your energy is not a great idea. But 15, 20 years down the line, hopefully this makes the U.S. completely self-sufficient when it comes to the nuclear fuel cycle and nuclear fuel supply chain.
I think we leave it on that. That was a good take. Anything else you want out in the world? That was a great ending take.
We're excited for everyone to just learn about Project Omega.
Absolutely.